How do you comprehend a life after sexual abuse? Welcome back to another episode of Irrepressible, ordinary people with extraordinary resilience. In this episode, I speak to Emma. Emma was sexually abused by a family member when she was younger and went on to experience more sexual abuse as a young adult. There's a huge trigger warning for what you're about to watch. This is probably one of the most raw and honest episodes that I've ever recorded for Irrepressible. So I just want to make sure that you feel okay to watch this video. Emma shares with courage and pure honesty about the things that she experienced. And there's so much to learn from this. I've got nothing but for gratitude for what she's been able to share. And I know if you've experienced any kind of sexual abuse, this is going to really, really resonate and help you a lot. And even if you haven't, there's so much to learn from what Emma shares in this video. If this is the first time that you've ever been here, then please make sure that you have subscribed and you turned on the notifications so you know each and every time that we post a video. And I'll just reiterate the trigger warning once again. There's a lot shared about sexual abuse, methodology and everything in this video, but the courage of Emma is beyond words. Thanks for watching. Emma, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation, especially from what's just been said before we hit record. I'm looking forward to what's being said. So before we get started, I always like to start by just letting you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing in the world today.
Okay, I'm Emma. I'm 39 years old and originally from Brighton. Spent some of my time living in Switzerland, now live in Dubai. And I host a podcast called Vulnerability Rocks, where I get to interview amazing people.
Yeah. And everybody should go and check out Vulnerability Rocks podcast. Because I've been on there. No, because look, Vulnerability Rocks, I think it says it all. And, you know, based on the things that my beliefs and my values, I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing. So today we're going to talk about resilience. So I'm really intrigued as to what we're going to talk about. So why don't I kick it straight off and ask you what is the adversity that you faced in your life that's meant that you've had to be resilient?
The truth is, there's been a whole catalogue of moments that have been very challenging, and I believe that one, in a way, led to another, because once you get sent down a rocky road, it tends to get rockier until you hit rock bottom, and then it gets better. But I thought today I would just talk with you about something that happened fairly early on in life. So when I was a teenager, my upbringing was particularly stressful and militant and difficult, to the point that I ran away from home at 15 and never went back. And then that was really the catalyst for what came next and what came afterwards. So my natural father was in my life till I was 9, but separated from my mother, I think, when I was 3 or something like this. He didn't feature massively in my life. He was an aggressive man, always gambling and, you know, being with other women and all of those things. And I had a stepfather in my life from the age of 4 onwards. When I left home at 15, I got disowned by my family at the request of my stepfather, really. And I was not allowed to have contact with my brothers, my mum, my grandparents, or anybody. Wow. And quickly became the bad influence friend, because of course when you're that young, all your friends are at home with their parents, and who wants their kid knocking around with a kid that's just in chaos? So I see it, and I see how parents can be worried about their kids knocking around and getting into with a bad crowd, especially if one of their children's friends seems to be going way off track, which I definitely was. And when I left home, I left with nothing. I left with just a bag on my back, which I don't think even had any clothes in it, maybe one change of clothes.
Wow.
And I remember leaving my house, and we lived materialistically on the outside. We lived in a lovely home. We looked like money wasn't the issue in our home. We weren't spoilt, but on the outside it looked like we probably had a really good life and a loving, nice home. But the truth was, emotionally, it just wasn't that. It was a very narcissistic, controlling environment. So when I left, I decided to leave one day, and it was after telling my stepdad at the age of 11. I said, as soon as I'm old enough, I'm out of here. And he said to me, he sat me down and he told me all the reasons why I could never achieve it, how I would never have enough money, how it just wasn't possible for me to do that. Now, maybe it's a personality thing. I don't know. I'm a Taurus, I'm stubborn. But instead of taking that as I need to stay at home longer and toe the line a bit longer and not have a voice and not be seen and be preached at with all of these very prejudiced views and be forced to take them on board and be forced to demonstrate that outside, which I just wasn't prepared to do, and I wasn't prepared to be treated the way I was being treated anymore. I took that lesson as, okay, you've shown me that I can't do it because I won't have enough money. So what he actually taught me was, I'll find a way to do it with no money. So it probably backfired for him in terms of his disciplinarian style. But what I did is I left with nothing, and I clicked the door behind me, and I'd never been given a key to my home. So I couldn't get back in. And I never felt so free and rich is the only way I could describe it. I felt like I was the richest person in the whole world, and the whole world was incredible and amazing, and I was the luckiest person to be placed on earth. That's how I felt when I left. So I had nowhere to sleep that night. I think I might have slept up on a golf course. And then I think I just sofa surfed around friends' houses, a boyfriend that I was with. And then what happened was, my natural father's brother decided to befriend me, and I was still only 15 at this point, and he was recently separated from his wife, and he gave me a lot of trust, and it was something I'd never been given before. So he trusted me to babysit the children, to have a key to his house, to let myself in and out as I pleased, would tell me that I was brave, amazing, trustworthy, all of the things that I had just never heard before. So I really felt like this is how I should be treated, and this is what real life is like, and this person's amazing. And he would come out, it was over a 2-year period. He made friends with all of my friends who were 16 then, by the time he started making friends with them. And he would come out with us. He was the cool uncle. I just couldn't believe how cool he was, because he just made my parents look like they were the worst people ever. And, you know, my stepdad had lots of faults. I do believe he loved me, just didn't know how to love me properly or how to care for my emotional needs. But my uncle made everything look like this is how life should be. So I just thought he was amazing, and he helped me get my first studio flat, which I moved into. Helped me, I paid for it, but I was too young to put my name on. So I went to the council and asked if I could have some help with my rent, because I wanted to do A-levels, because I'd got 13 GCSEs A to C, and I was scheduled to do 4 A-levels. Because the job I was working at the time was, I think, £1.50 an hour or £2 an hour. And it just wasn't enough hours. I didn't have enough hours in the week to work and study my A-levels. I tried for a bit, but I just couldn't. And I couldn't earn anymore because I wasn't skilled, and I was 16 and all I could do was wash dishes and flip burgers. I couldn't do anything more, and I was working all the hours. So I went to the council and asked for some help, and they told me that I had two choices, that I could go to work or I could go into a children's home. I told them, I won't swear, stuff you.
Yeah.
and walked out. So then my uncle helped me get the studio flat, which I paid for, gave up doing my A levels, and I slept on the floor, on just a sheet on the floor. And I remember cleaning my carpets with a dustpan and brush because I couldn't afford a Hoover. And I remember being so grateful. I used to clean my carpets with the dustpan and brush, like almost saying thank you with every sweep, because I just couldn't believe that I was in this space that was mine, and I had a key and it was my home. And yeah, it was only a sheet on the floor and I had no cutlery, nothing, and a dustpan and brush to clean my floor. But I can't tell you how proud and happy I was, and how grateful I was to my uncle for helping me get that. Anyway, fast forward a year or so. By this point, he's a massive part in my life, and he's friends with all my friends. He's, yeah, this amazing person. So like any other night, went out one night. He came for drinks with me and my friends. We lived in a town where there was only a few pubs and one club. So if you're out, everyone's out. Everyone knows everyone. And he said, like normal, I'll walk you home. So he walked me home, and we sat in my lounge, and I made him a cup of tea. I'd moved into a bigger flat by this point because it was a year and a half on, and I was on better money. And we were sitting in the lounge and a cup of tea. And I had, by this point, I was working at a nursing home and a funeral home in the day. And I had a 12-hour shift the next morning. And I said to him, I think it must have been about 1 o'clock or something in the morning, and I had to be at work at 8, and he was still finishing his tea. So I said to him, I'm going to go to bed now. Let yourself out, because I've got to be up early. So I took myself to bed and fell straight asleep. I don't know exactly how long it was afterwards, but I woke up and he was in my bed, and with his hands in places they shouldn't have been. And it was only a single bed, so it's not like it was a double bed, and he'd never shared a bed with me before. And I remember just freezing, because I couldn't work out at first if it was a dream or if it was real. And yeah, I just froze. So, people say, oh, if someone tried to sexually assault me or rape me, I'd kick and scream and shout. In theory, yeah. In reality, I've spoken to a lot of people that have been in similar situations, and a lot of people freeze, actually. So anyway, I remember saying to him, I had a boyfriend that I was sort of on and off with, and I remember saying to him, oh, I really need to see this person, this boyfriend of mine. And I said his name, and it was really sinister and horrible, because he just kept whispering in my ear, you don't need him now, you've got me. You don't need him now, you've got me. You don't need him now, you've got me. Whilst still moving his hands around me. So I then said to him, I thought that might get him to go. I then said to him, I need you to leave. I need you to leave. I need you to leave. I just kept saying it over and over again, but it was all so quiet. There was no distress. There was no big Hollywood for me. And it may be that way for other people. For me, it wasn't that. So I eventually got him to, I didn't get him to leave. He left, and I remember laying really still in my bed while he put his while he put his shoes back on and his whatever back on. And then I heard him go down and the door shut. The next thing I can remember is ringing my parents' house. And at this point, I was still sort of disowned, really, by them. And then my mum appearing at the flat, and then appearing at my parents' house and being given the choices of, I kept saying, they're saying we're going to call the police. And I said, no, I don't need you to call the police. I said, all you've got to do is ring him. I was convinced. You've just got to ring him and say to him, you know, what's happened. And I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, I'm really sorry, I've made a mistake. I said, and then I just don't need to see him again. That was my answer. The choices on the table for me were we ring the police or my stepdad's going to go and kill him.
Yeah.
You know, so I then it's a bit patchy, which I now understand is a normal response to something that's overwhelming and has caused you trauma. So I regained quite a lot of bits of it during doing EMDR work last year. But I then remember waking up on the sofa in my parents' house and the police being in front of me. Then what happened after that is a 2 year ordeal. So I was 17 at this point when this happened, and the court case happened when I was 19, and I think it was 3 days in a Crown Court, something like that. But what happened in the next 2 years was chaotic, and I see it as sort of a bit of a trigger for what all then started to happen next. He was a well thought of man. Everybody loved him in the town. No one could believe that he would do something like this. So I very quickly got labelled the troubled girl that was estranged from her family, that was looking for sympathy. Look at all the wrong decisions she's making. So when I bumped into him in the town, because I was still living in the town and it was small, he would say things to me like, you've made it all up, Emma, this is all in your head, I think you're mad, you know, why would you say this about me, with everything that I've done for you, you know, real head twisting stuff, to the point you sit there and think, maybe I made it all up, maybe that, you know. And then I had people coming after me. So I had someone try because he had a girlfriend at the time. By this point, his girlfriend tried to run me over in her car.
Wow.
His girlfriend's sister came up to me in a club and bit out a chunk of the back of my arm, because he just convinced everybody I was a liar.
Yeah.
Because I was a troubled young person. So so then it went to court, and obviously my credibility as a witness got called into question, because my life went really chaotic after that, which you know, when these things happen, life gets more chaotic. The more chaotic it gets, the more chaotic it gets, right? But the law system seems to work in a funny way. It's like you're only taken seriously if you're, I don't know, you know, in a really good space or something, but generally it doesn't work like that.
Your credibility is measured on how you're acting, right? But when you've been through something as traumatic as that, then you're not going to be acting in what would be seen as a credible way. But based on everything else that you'd experienced too.
Yeah, like I'd already run away from home. I'd already, do you know?
Yeah.
2 dads that hadn't worked out. It's just so anyway, I ended up, that then was the catalyst for this whole kind of, I then ended up in really bad circles, in really vulnerable positions, which led me to being violently raped at the age of 19, which ironically had just happened just before I went into the court case. But it just shows me how one bad thing can lead to another very, very quickly, and with no support network around you, which I didn't have at the time because I was becoming more and more troubled by the month, and all my friends were still at home. you become a less desirable person for those young people to be allowed to hang around with.
Right.
So you lose even more support,
Yeah.
and the support network gets less and less, and you end up in a space where you're mixing with people much older than you in really unsafe situations. And then, you know, I ultimately ended up in a really unsafe situation when I was 19 and ended up being violently raped. So it's just, ugh.
And by the way, the first time when it went to court, it was found innocent.
He was found not guilty.
Not guilty, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then was there another court case for the second one?
No, I didn't
No.
bother. I'd learned that
You couldn't go through it again.
there's no point. I didn't know who the second person was either.
Wow.
So where would I have even started? I suppose if I'd gone on the day, what I got told with my uncle was because he hadn't raped me and ejaculated inside me, it was difficult to prove that he had done what he had done because there was little physical evidence. So they took all of my bedding, clothes, his clothes, and they did forensics on that. And they found an equal number, because he was wearing his top and jeans when he was in my bed. They found an equal number of fibres from his top and his trousers on my bottom sheet of my bed, which would insinuate he was lying down because it was an equal distribution of fibres found.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on my bottom sheet, wasn't on my duvet.
Yeah.
Now, he denied ever entering my bedroom, so how would I have those fibres like that? But unfortunately, because I was so chaotic at the time, if Emma now was showing up, I'm sure it would be very different. But Emma at 19,
Having experienced all that she's experienced, right?
I probably wasn't showing up very well.
No.
And I didn't know what to do or how to handle myself and all of those things. So it's just, unfortunately, one of the weaknesses in the system for proving things like sexual assault. And it's easier to prove rape because if they can find semen inside of you, it's easier to prove. So, I mean, looking back, if I had gone to have an examination when I got raped when I was 19, they would have been able to find that. But I think by that point I was so broken that I just
and you faced nothing.
thought, what's the point?
Exactly, and there's been like so much rejection up until that point. You're not going to want to risk more rejection, right? Your experience has told you that it's not worth doing. So that would make perfect sense. Well, not perfect sense, but like it would make sense.
Well, I'd learned it. No good comes of it. No good comes of it. That's what I learned.
Yeah, that's what your experience taught you. It's like incredible amount of trauma that you've had to experience at that such a young stage in your life as well. And obviously I'd imagine that a few years of kind of wildness followed that, right? Of acting out how you felt on the inside, right? Which is what I believe anyone's behavior is, right? So you would naturally, the person that sits in front of me today, that has the Vulnerability Rocks podcast, that's doing the things, that's living in Dubai, is, in a happy stage of your life. What's enabled you, do you think, to get from how you were to where you are now, having experienced such an incredible amount of trauma at such a young age?
The truth is I ran for a long time. I just ran in different ways. So the first way I ran through partying, substances, not alcohol so much actually, although it would come with it. But
of course, yeah.
I just, a lot of substance use. And then it turned into work, being obsessed with work. People used to call me a workaholic. And then it was exercise. And slowly but surely I've been shedding each one of these things, and it just morphs into like a slightly healthier numbing out. And it's really only in the last couple of years that I have taken the step back from being a workaholic and taking a step back from being an exerciseaholic.
Yeah.
And stepped into, I've had counselling along the way, but stepped into trauma work. And it was when I was doing EMDR last year that I realised that what was at the bottom of that event as being the most traumatic thing was not what happened. So the sexual assault with my uncle and the rape with someone I don't know, it wasn't what they did, it's this. So through that trauma work, they get you to, what is the worst part about it for you? Now, on paper, you'd say the fact that he overstepped that boundary, was in my bed and had his hands where he shouldn't have had them. But actually, it was the fact that I thought I could trust him.
The one person, yeah.
And I thought I had found this adult who believed in me and who really had my best interests at heart. And that was the bit that devastated me, not the physical action. And the rape that happened was similar. So the narrative is similar. There was a lady sat in the other room who promised me that she would make sure that I was safe. And when this man started violently raping me, I shouted for her help, and she heard me and she didn't come. And this man was so big I couldn't physically move him off me. And he was so aggressive and violent that he had a condom on, but it ended up breaking and going all inside me. So I was, it was just the pits, is the truth. But the worst bit of it, take the physical part to the side, is that these two people who I believed had sort of been sent to me as these amazing people that were going to keep me safe and hold me safe, had no intention of keeping me safe. They both had their own agenda, and they were both happy to watch me suffer and let it happen. And that's the bit that caused me the trauma, not that actual physical act.
Wow. And you learned that, I guess, from doing the EMDR therapy. That's been so huge for you, right?
Massive.
Yeah.
And then obviously journaling and everything else that I do to take stock of where emotions are coming from. But yeah, when we got to the bottom of it, it was that I really trusted you and you betrayed me and you didn't keep me safe, because that's what I'm craving. I'm craving safety. I'm craving love. I'm craving unconditional love and trust, which is what these people all gave me in a grooming way. Both people. Yeah, I was kind of groomed by both people.
Yeah. And grooming, we often think that grooming only takes place with children as well, right? But that's not the case. I mean, the first time was in your case, the first time you was a child, by the way. But in the second instance, you would certainly by society considered an adult, right? And grooming still very much takes place.
The thing is, though, with that, it's interesting that you say that the first instance I was a child, because I'd never classed myself as a child. But then now, as you know, I'm actively trying to be a parent.
Yeah.
And if I think about myself with a child of 17, I would think they were a child. But it's taken me a long time to realise that I was a child.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
When it happened. And even at 19, I think, because what I've learned is when there's a lot going on in your younger years, there's not the space for emotional development to take place.
No.
So you stay younger for a long time, even though on the outside you're brash and you're coping and you're all of these things.
Yeah. Emotionally, you remain kind of like a child, but you're actually like seen as being very mature for your age, because you've had to learn like about some of the complexities of life that you shouldn't have had to learn, right? And so who even when we say you were an adult, what you go to bed when you're 17 for the last time, and then when you wake up when you're 18, you're an adult. It doesn't really work like that, right? Because you've not been given the tools to for adulthood. Then of course you're still not really an adult.
No.
And
and you remain vulnerable for far longer than you believe and others believe.
Yeah.
So other people think that you're robust and you're resilient and you're doing all these things, but actually the truth is you remain vulnerable until you start to
Heal. And
heal.
until you start to heal, until you start to learn what, you know, the things that you should have learned when you was a child, really.
Mm-hmm.
Until you learn
Mm-hmm.
those things that you're missing, then you're still a child.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what the age you are. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a massive learning. I guess I'm conscious of time, but this, if you had to kind of give something, and I mean, you've already given so much for people to take away. I think if anybody's even remotely experienced some of the things that you've experienced, this is going to be huge. I wasn't expecting it either.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I like it that I don't expect it, but what would you say that you've learned about yourself, having been through all of that now and be where you are today? What's the big thing that people can take away that you've learned about yourself?
That the biggest thing that I've learned is that it wasn't my fault and I didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
And that took me a long time. I only managed to say that to myself last year.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing I've learned, is to not carry it as my own doing. Just because I was a problematic child doesn't mean I deserved my uncle to do that to me. Doesn't mean I deserved to be violently raped while the lady sat next door and listened and didn't help me. I didn't deserve that.
No.
And it's not mine to carry in terms of responsibility. It's my job to fix how I feel, not fix, but, you know, get to work with how I feel and find peace with that. That is my job, but it's not my fault. And there is a difference.
Yeah.
So I've learned that. I've also learned that if anybody has experienced anything similar, I know that we only step into our own healing work when we're ready. But if you can be brave enough to take a deep breath and sit still for a minute and to turn and face it, I promise you'll move through it quicker. Because I ran and I kept running till I was in my 30s. So the one thing I wish I had done is stop running a bit sooner.
Wow. That's powerful. And look, listen, you know, I just want to say I appreciate everything that you've managed to share today. I think it's incredible that people are going to learn a huge amount from this. There's going to be a lot of people that take a lot from this, especially, you know, to see where you are today as well, despite what you've been through. I think it's incredible. Where can people find you? Where can people find the vulnerability podcast?
So just vulnerabilityrocks.com, all the links are on there. You find me Vulnerability Rocks podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, and my personal profile's linked on there, so it's all easy to find.
Amazing. Emma, thank you so much for this. I can't wait to share it with people.
Thank you.